All right, let's bring in our crew for this hour. I'm really delighted to welcome back to the show my friend, your friend, our friend, immigration attorney Allen Orr and Isaac Wilson, former South Carolina Democratic Party chair and Democratic strategist. Welcome back to both of you.
Glad to be back, brother.
All right. Well, we have to start with Lindsey Graham. He died Saturday night at 71 years old. The cause of death, per preliminary findings, was an aortic dissection. Look, we're not here to dance on anybody's grave, but Lindsey Graham's relationship with Black voters and, frankly, with Latino voters was one of the most complicated in modern Southern politics. Isaac, you watched this man operate on the ground in South Carolina for many of the 2 decades. Break that down for us.
Definitely. I want to first, my thoughts are with his family and friends and staff and the people who work with him here in South Carolina. He did do some great things for South Carolina at a time. His relationship with Black voters was definitely complicated. There were moments that he reached across the aisle and sought for bipartisanship and got solutions. But many Black Americans and South Carolinians are judging him by the positions he took in recent years, particularly his close alignment with Donald Trump and support for policies that they believe didn't help their communities and help their bottom line, right? He wrote back, wanted to roll back voting rights. He didn't have judicial fairness and economic opportunity for people here in South Carolina. So it's okay to respect his service over, the last 3 decades, but it doesn't require us to ignore what he has done for Black communities and not done for Black communities here in South Carolina.
Alan, let's pull on the immigration thread a little bit because that's actually where Senator Lindsey Graham's legacy gets really complicated for Black and brown communities specifically. This is a man who, at various points, he tried to be the Republican face for comprehensive immigration reform. Remember the Gang of Eight and the DREAM Act conversations? Mm-hmm. And then at other points, he fell in line completely behind the current administration's approach. What's the real legacy of Senator Lindsey Graham here?
Yeah, so it's different for me in so many ways. I think his work will speak for itself, but also having the ability to say that I also was a former Republican. There are 2 Lindsey Grahams. There's Lindsey Grahams of the 1996 and there's Lindsey Graham of the 2020s. And they're very distinct people who have a very different history. The Republican Lindsey Graham that I knew from the early 1996 was someone who was in the Republican Party, an honored bound person, and sort of represented his lawyer background and looking for justice and service for people, maybe not always hitting the mark, but not purposely in sort of a hateful direction towards trying to harm necessarily everybody. It was a little bit more of a Reagan-esque mixed bag of things, depending on your perspective. The Lindsey Graham of 2020 and further after that, in the Supreme Court and all the things that have happened to immigrants and Black people since then, I cannot salute that or celebrate that. It's not a legacy, right? It's a tragedy to sort of see someone with so much power to not use it in that way. So he accumulated a lot of power for himself, but he did move very much in a direction that would help the community. And while he did have a clear vision on immigration from before, he did not implement it at all in his direction with this new administration. You saw some cases where he did sort of stand out in front of things, specifically with birthright citizenship. But beyond that very constitutionally protected thing, he was a wavering person who was just making his way through, like every other senator right now, just standing closer to the current president. And that was disappointing.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. More on the complicated legacy of Senator Lindsey Graham, the late Senator Lindsey Graham, when we come forward. You're listening to A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai, and really delighted to be in conversation with immigration attorney Allen Orr and South Carolina Democratic Strategist Isaac Wilson is joining us. We've been talking about really the very sordid legacy of Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, who died this weekend suddenly at the age of 71. Not long after it was reported he passed away, President Trump was out there, talking about the last conversation he had with Lindsey Graham, which seemed to be shortly before he had this medical emergency. And the president didn't waste any time really soft selling the SAVE Act. He made it clear that Lindsey Graham was in favor of that legislation. He was working on that legislation, and sort of invoke the idea of paying tribute to Lindsey Graham by passing that legislation. What are you hearing in South Carolina at this hour, Isaac?
It's very, mixed feelings here in South Carolina, but for Democrats, especially Black Democrats, they are saying, hey, we aren't, grieving or making fun of somebody's death, but we're not going to sit here and act like this man has done all these great things here. And so there's a mixed thing online where people are saying, well, if you don't have anything nice, don't say it at all. And I think that just isn't right. Just because you die, people don't forget all of the things that you did or did not do. And you have to live with that in the legacy. So the decisions that you make while you're on top of soil, they matter to people when you're here, and they matter to people when you're gone. And people don't forget that. And they don't have to come to the forefront and start saying all these good things about you. They tell the truth, and the truth needs to be said even when you're gone.
Alan, I see you nodding your head vigorously.
Right. I think so. When we think about the legacy in many places, let's just think about the Supreme Court, because that's where we've seen the erosion of voting rights and women's rights within this time of people that were appointed using the same rule at one point of saying you can't support a Supreme Court justice this late in someone's term and then change it around for the next thing. Mm-hmm. So that kind of a double play. So that's the legacy. The Supreme Court we have today that have a 5-4, 6-3 vote on birthright citizenship, a constitutionally protected thing. That's part of the legacy. And that's what they'll be remembered for. And with regards to the SAVE Act and the president sort of propping that up and pushing it through in that direction, I think we can take the president's words at the exact same way we can take Lindsey's legacy about, having an agenda and propaganda sort of pushing in that way. I don't think the SAVE Act really has any legs to stand on, and there's really hasn't been a proven need for the SAVE Act. That's the real problem. How can all of these people who said they were duly elected claim that all these elections are fraud? People need to sit with that as these people challenge these elections of people who are currently in office in a majority in the House, the Senate, and the White House. Why are you not focused on other things? Why is this focused on the SAVE Act in this moment? And most of all, Lindsey Graham was working on Russian situation and trying to get restraints for them. If anything, that should be his legacy, because he already has the bill pending right now in the Senate.
I want to go back to something you said, Alan. You were talking about birthright citizenship, and before the show, read a whole lot of things, as you all do as well. And I was reading a press release from Senator Graham's office dated June 30th, where the senator made a statement in response to that 5-4 decision, that Supreme Court decision on birthright citizenship, saying, quote, "For years, I've been pushing legislation and a constitutional amendment to change the United States policy on birthright citizenship. While I'm disappointed in the court's decision regarding birthright citizenship, I am determined more than ever to put an end to this major magnet for illegal immigration and birth tourism." That doesn't seem like it's going to age too well.
Well, I mean, I think it's so. Let's look at it. You're looking at it from the jar, from the bottom of the jar. At the top of the jar, he knew that it was constitutionally protected. And it would take a constitutional amendment to change it. So that means that it's constitutionally protected, which he had said before. So that's sort of a fair statement about what the Constitution is and sort of being his goal. This new story about birtherism and birth tourism is just a fake story. It just does not happen. It's just not a large number. There's no statistics on it. It's this boogeyman. And for some reason, America loves the boogeyman. They love the immigrant that's coming to get them that they've never seen. They love this voting fraud that's happening for people who are voting in these polls where most immigrants are just working and trying to stay under the radar. They can't find you a single case of that situation. In no federal organization can tell you exactly how many people came to this country to have a baby. And when the president himself is in a situation where a lot of his kids could be considered anchor babies, this is not a strong position to sort of work from.
I mean, look, you said it, this party, the Republican Party, seems to be really attracted to the boogeyman so much that I wouldn't be surprised if they attempt to pass a bill that changes our national bird from the bald eagle to the boogeyman. I mean, that's how into it they appear to be. I want to ask you this question, Isaac, because right now in South Carolina, there's been a lot of speculation around who might fulfill the rest of Senator Graham's term. There are a lot of names that were out there, including Governor McMaster's son. There are some folks on these internet streets that were even talking about Steve Colbert potentially filling that seat. That, of course, being a long shot with this Republican governor. But this governor landed on Lindsey Graham's sister, the exact person that President Trump wanted to fulfill the rest of his term. Talk to us about the politics of that.
Oh, very much so politics. First and foremost, I disagree with Governor McMaster's decision. So South Carolina deserves a more political, active person. She was behind the scenes. She did some things for Lindsey, but she don't know the ins and outs of the government and what the people need here in South Carolina. A United States Senate seat belongs to the people and not to one family. So while I respect Senator Graham's service, appointing his sister sends the wrong message at a time when voters are demanding transparency and fairness. This right here is just an old classic for white folk, nepotism. Finish what I started, go and align yourself with the people I align myself with and vote how they vote, because you have no other alliances. Your alliance is Donald Trump. He made the call. He got you in there. Your alliance will be to him. And so whatever the people of South Carolina want is going to have to take a back seat, because you're going to have to cover up to Donald Trump. And that's just not right for the people here in South Carolina.
And for folks here who are less familiar, who are just tapping in, it's important to note that Governor Henry McMaster of South Carolina, he appointed Lindsey Graham's own sister, Darlene Graham Norton, to finish out the remainder of his term. This came together within about 48 hours of his death. And McMaster made it official this afternoon. Graham actually took legal guardianship of Darlene Norton when he was 22 and she was 13, after both of their parents died within 15 months of each other. So there's a real family history under this appointment, not just optics. But Allen, this isn't a caretaker that nobody's heard of. I just mentioned, that Trump is directly installing a family member into a Senate seat. He likes to install family members and loyalists into important seats, but he's doing this ahead of a special primary. What's Trump looking to get out of this when it comes to moving whatever bit of his agenda he can move between now and end of the year?
Right, because we know that Mitch McConnell's out, so the numbers were looking weak, and they needed someone in the seat, and they needed someone who's not going to question what they're doing. Right, this is basically performer appointment. I mean, I don't know what her background is per se. I don't believe she's a lawyer, and I don't believe she has the knowledge or the depth to do this. And I don't think that Senate she should go to a family member, regardless of if it's a Democrat or Republican. I don't think your sister or your wife should get the seat, unless they were your number two person and your chief of staff or something of that nature. It just seems odd and crazy to me in this time where so many things are contentious in the Senate to make such an appointment that someone's just going to go in and just vote either way. But that's what it's about, is the votes, right? Because we know this term is really a short term, right? We're just barely making it through. It's not a full 2 years or 3 years. There'll be a special election in August, and that's what we should sort of look to see what the future of the Republican Party will look like in South Carolina, and sort of look at South Carolina and think about all this Republican control over all of this time. Where is the state now in the rankings? Where are they in education? Where are they in healthcare? Where are they? And all the Black people that live there, where are they and why are they not voting? Because that's also another issue to motivate and say, listen, this is the time, if ever there was a time, for the South to finally stand up and say, you know what, I'm voting for me, not whoever's running. It doesn't matter. I forget. I guess I do know, or maybe I did know who's running from the Democratic side. Doesn't matter.
Dr. Jermaine Johnson,
that you're voting for you at this point. And to sort of get away from these politics that we're seeing, this nepotism happen, and also the stealing of the government from the presidency. Why is the president involved in state level politics? Should be the primary question that South Carolina can ask themselves. Are they not able to make these decisions for themselves?
We're going to pick up on that question and more when we come forward. You're listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai. He's Allen Orr Esquire, founder of Orr Immigration Law, our resident immigration attorney here and frequent contributor, along with Dr. Isaac Wilson, who's a Democratic strategist and former South Carolina Democratic Party chair. Isaac, I want to go to you first on this one. And look, every time there is a crisis, there are folks that are of the mind. It also represents an opportunity. Talk to us about the opportunity that this special election creates for Democrats, particularly for organizers on the ground who are already doing the work to seize this moment, and how our listeners can support them.
Every political transition creates an opportunity, and this right here creates a wide open opportunity. But Democrats have to compete aggressively. We can't go in with this modest touch. We have to go in there aggressively in neighborhoods because South Carolina has changed. There are more young voters, there are more suburban voters, and more people who simply are tired of the politics as usual. This isn't about conceding the state. It's about contesting every vote in every county. The way that our organizers seize this moment is by getting out of the political bubble and into these communities, right? Knock on doors, register voters, invest in rural South Carolina and not just in Charleston, Columbia, or Greenville. We got to talk about the issues that people feel every day: the cost of living, healthcare, education, protecting Social Security, expanding Medicare in South Carolina, and creating jobs. We can't just show up 6 weeks before the election day talking about these different kind of issues. The race won't just be about South Carolina either. It will have national implications. People across the country can volunteer remotely by phone banking and text banking. They can donate to Democratic candidates and grassroots organizations and help amplify the message that we're not taking the stuff from Republicans anymore. 22 years of Republican control here, and we're 48th in education. We don't have Medicare and hospitals in rural communities here. And people have problems with kitchen table topics like gas prices and just grocery money. So people are hurting, and that's what Democrats have to get out and aggressively put this message out.
The one thing I didn't hear you mention was Trump. You talked about a lot of kitchen table issues, and I think this is just a news flash to all of our leaders, learners, and listeners. As much as we follow Trump's headlines, as much as we need to keep a line of sight on everything that Trump and his administration are doing, what we're hearing from someone on the ground that's tapped in South Carolina is that the people that need to get to the polls, they're not thinking about Trump 24/7. They're thinking about all the things that Isaac just outlined. And so, for folks that are about, sort of turning this country in a different direction, you have an opportunity to support organizing work that's on the ground happening right now in South Carolina. Where can people go to tap in, Isaac?
You can go to JermaineJohnson.com. You can go to the South Carolina Democratic Party.com. Any candidate that meets your interest, you go to their page and donate. But the South Carolina Democratic Party has all you need for every candidate that's listed for the November elections.
Oh, wait, are there elections happening tomorrow at a local level? Are there some state local elections tomorrow?
No.
Okay.
Our primaries are on June 9th, and they already wrapped up with the special elections as well.
Okay.
Yes. And so the special election specifically for Republicans is on August 11th, correct?
August 11th.
All right. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit because there's so many other news stories. I actually want to stay on immigration for a second or go back to it because while we're all watching, this succession battle, some very serious things are happening on the ground. Allen, walk us through Maine, where on Monday, ICE was involved in yet another fatal shooting in Biddeford, Maine, according to the state's House Speaker. That's the second fatal ICE-involved shooting in under a week after Houston.
Right. So just because people are listening today, right, this morning. So not like, yes, last Monday, but this Monday after something had already happened in Houston.
That's right.
And I want us to also be able to sort of start talking about this differently. This is not an immigration story. This is a black and brown, you're in danger on the street story, because this story, along with the Houston story, have two people who may have some mixed status of no issue at this point, but now they're dead for being nothing but present. Neither of them were the target of the investigation. The officer who shot the gun did not know their status and did not know their person until afterwards. So therefore, this could have happened to any of us in this situation. Furthermore, the policy with regards to shooting someone in a car also wasn't followed. That's a national policy. There are 2 Supreme Court cases that establish that under almost a very unique circumstance, extreme danger for your life, are you supposed to shoot at someone in a car? And under these policies, both in Houston and in Maine, neither of those were followed through. In Maine, you have a 26-year-old Colombian, while in Houston, you have a 53-year-old Mexican. Both of them have been in the country for some time period. They were not a threat. We're not sure about the back record for the 26-year-old, but I am certain the 50-year-old did not have a criminal record and had been paying taxes and was in the process of getting himself some form of status. And as we talked about on the show, status is not something that everybody can just avail because the immigration law has not been updated since the 80s. If there were a pathway for people who are here, who are undocumented, who have mixed status, who are in DACA, who are in TPS, to get to citizenship, then they would do it. Congress does not have a pathway for that, and that's the problem. They allow them to stay and hold up, like DACA, the 10-year, 12-year anniversary, I think, that just happened with DACA. So that's the main concern. So for your listeners and learners, what they need to know is, specifically with the ending of TPS for Haitians, in large communities like Philadelphia, Miami, Atlanta, New York, ICE officers may be stopping you. And these are real stories that can happen to any American, because in both of these factors, they did not know the person's immigration status. And in both of these factors, they immediately weaponized the accidents that the person was trying to hit them with the car, which you'd already heard with the Renee Good story, right? They sort of putting out these narratives. They're pulling back on Maine of not telling that specific story. But as we all know as Black people, and their primary rule is dead people cannot defend themselves.
That's right.
That's a primary thing that we all know from either Life, Law and Order, or why can I think of the Baltimore show? My gosh. The Wire. That there's a situation where you definitely want to go and understand what these people are doing. And in almost every case, there will be no criminal prosecution of the person who shot them because of immunity. If it were a local cop in Maine or in Houston, they could be prosecuted criminally. Because it's a federal officer and because of our federal rules and a case written by Clarence Thomas in a line of Bivens cases, these officers almost have immunity, which means they can shoot, you can die, and they will walk away. And the only thing you're left with in a very small case is a tort claim to get some money. And we all know that money for the death of your husband or your child is not justice.
Allen, you mentioned the folks with temporary protective status. Now, there are some that might say there was actually some good news that was buried in the news cycle. Hours before expiration, the U.S. extended work permission for immigrants with temporary protective status. Allen, help people understand what TPS actually protects and why an extension just hours before expiration should terrify us more than it comforts us.
Yeah, so I want to remodel that story a little bit to sort of change, because they went to the Supreme Court to end TPS, so they did not extend TPS. The TPS ruling from the Supreme Court has to go to the lower court, which generally takes about 25 to 30 days in order for the lower court to remove the status and mean these individuals do not have work authorization. The government made a published notice a week ago saying that on July 10th, TPS was ending, with the assumption that the lower court will have removed their hold and the grant on temporary status. On Friday morning, it made it incredibly difficult for employers to continue to employ individuals because they weren't clear on the law. Because DHS knew on Thursday that the court wasn't removing the holding because they're in court today. So there's no way on Friday or Thursday or Wednesday, they didn't know that the lower court was not going to remove it and these people have work authorization. So a lot of these Haitians, these TPS, temporary protective status holders who've been in the country for 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, were released from their job because they didn't have work authorization. So in that morning, me and other attorneys started publishing the rule saying, wait a minute, they still have work authorization. That date is just a soft date. You have to read the whole notice. And then DHS around lunchtime issued saying, we're going to give them to the 24th. So the government didn't give them anything in a way, and it caused a lot of confusion across the board, and they're looking to cut it short. And for people who don't understand, a day's worth of labor or 2 days worth of labor is very important to these immigrant people who are living paycheck to paycheck. So basically, when someone has work authorization and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with their lives, whether they're going to leave the country or hire an immigration lawyer or whatever it is, not being able to work that 1 day or 2 days for that $100, $200 is a lot of money when someone's living on the edge from paycheck to paycheck. So this government has caused nothing but mass confusion with regards to saying that there are going to be 350,000 Haitians that are going to lose their status. And when they do lose their status and they try to remove them, there are going to be a lot of U.S. kids born of these Haitian parents who are going to be left in this country that are going to become wards of the state. In addition to that, on Friday, the government was supposed to make a ruling with regards to TPS for El Salvadorians. They did not, because it's within the time frame. That's another class of 175 individuals who've been in the country for at least 25 years with no option to get any status, that they're thinking about saying, okay, you know what? In 6 months or in 2 weeks, you need to leave the United States. That is not equitable under the law. So you almost have 500,000 people who have been in this country, documented, working, paying taxes, not voting, no criminal, because if you get arrested, then of course you got deported, that we're just pulling out the economic system to feed this deportation model where the president said he was going to remove 1 million people. And he can't remove 1 million people because he's only removed 450,000 because the courts are so backlogged and they fired so many judges. So the original question that you asked me was about TPS. TPS is a temporary protective status. It is misnamed, right? Because people think temporary. And some people say, well, life is temporary, right? It's renewed every 18 months. The condition for temporary status, if you look at the statute, are the home conditions. Is it safe for the person to go to their home country? If it's not safe for the person to go to the home country, they should still be granted that status regardless of what you call it, right? And that's the confusion here, because people who are on TPS, as we spoke about last week, do not take any public benefits. They don't get welfare, they don't get SNAP, they don't get any of those things. They're not eligible for those things, and taking that benefit would deny them the status of TPS. So having a clear understanding of who we're talking about makes it easier when we talk about immigration in general, because so many people in the immigration conversation are all taking something from us, right? There's this conversation of taking and taking and taking. But what we've discovered last week with the jobs number is deporting immigrants do not create more U.S. jobs. They actually hurt economies by removing people from those economies. In places like South Carolina that don't exactly have a population bloom, or Maine, or any of the Midwestern states, right? Experience that. And this is the thing that's important I want people to hear too. There's an immigration class, H-2Bs, these agricultural visas, that the government is continually increasing to get more workers over here when there are already workers here. And that is inexplicably unexplainable in this situation. So it is not good for this government to not know the consistency in which we can rely on our government for workers who've been here for a long time, and is a misallocation of money. And just a side point about all this stuff about the ICE officers, there's a conversation of why weren't they wearing their cameras, their body cams? And that was funded in the last bill, apparently. But the car cams were not on and the body cams were not on. So those things are also confusing when you start having an understanding of how can all of this happen so quickly when ICE officers are not in charge of traffic stops, right? None of us have encountered an ICE officer when running a red light or speeding through a city or busted tail light. That is not their job. Statutorily is not their job to enforce that. So in both of these cases, we're looking at things where there was a warrant. They stopped cars that were not the people who were in the cars, supposedly on a traffic violation, one in an unmarked car, and I'm not exactly sure what happened in the main case, but all of these things are inconsistent with the liberties afforded to the American under the Constitution. And Black people are about to have a hard awakening with an understanding of just how much ICE is going to push people to try to get immigrants and how much they're going to be able to harass you. And that's why along with other organizations, are making sure we do the know your rights conversations and making sure people have the appropriate documentation to establish I'm a United States citizen. And so once you establish you're a United States citizen, ICE is supposed to leave you alone unless you're involved in some federal crime.
That's the way it's supposed to be. But we're seeing so much creep from what they say the mission is of the folks that work in ICE. I'm curious, Isaac, I really want you to weigh in on this. How is this hitting on the ground in South Carolina? Because there are some that think that these immigration issues represent sort of a fault line in the Black community, right? There are a lot of folks that may concede that immigration is not a Black issue. I don't think any of us here see it that way, but there are people out there in our community that do see it that way. How do people on the ground in South Carolina see it?
Immigration, I mean, it just isn't a border issue. It's a South Carolina issue, of course. Black communities are feeling the impact in ways that are often don't get enough attention. So many Black, business owners, they rely on immigrant workers and customers, right? You're talking about even hospitals, farms, construction companies. These are immigrants that are working. So when they don't work and they can't work, you are essentially taken away from that business being able to do the everyday necessary things to provide for their family. So when immigration policy is driven by uncertainty instead of common sense, local economies suffer and Black communities suffer. So we don't talk enough about that in itself. But at the same time, many Black Americans understand what it feels like to fight for equal treatment under the law. That's why so many of us believe we can have secure borders while also ensuring that people are treated with dignity, due process, and the respect for others' constitutional rights. Those values are in conflict in America right now. And too often, Black folk have been put in the same situation of always fighting for our rights or fighting for something here in these United States of America that is supposed to be the land of the free. But Black folk are still living in bondage, just like every other race is continuing to, we're starting to live out right now.
When we come forward, look, Trump is moving to tighten federal control of elections ahead of the midterms. When we come forward, I want to give you all the final word. As an immigration lawyer, as a Democratic strategist, what does it actually mean operationally? And should Black and brown voters specifically be worried right now? I want to give you a chance to respond to that when we come forward. You're listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.